All right, this is going to be a video on how to derive the name or sigil of any intelligence or spirit of an entire astrological election. Now, why would you want to do this? Because as we know, the traditional planets already have intelligences and spirits associated with them, and we know them by name, and we have their sigils. And why would you want to do something like this instead? Well, one thing that I really like about this method that's found in Book 3, Chapter 26 of Agrippa's Three Books of Occult Philosophy is that it allows you to highlight other elements of the election than just the primary planet that is associated with the talisman. In other words, if you are making a Mars talisman, and you are calling upon the intelligence of Mars, which is Graphiel, then a lot of the energetic focus there is on Mars alone. Whereas in reality, any astrological election is going to be colored and flavored by the aspects formed to the other planets. So, one cool thing about this method of electional intelligences and spirits is that you're calling upon an intelligence or spirit of the nature of whatever aspects of that election you'd like to highlight. Additionally, this method is necessary for any kind of work regarding outer planets. Um, so, in other words, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto do not have a known intelligence or spirit name associated with them, and naturally, you would not be able to derive a sigil as well. So, this is just generally helpful for if you want to call upon a name, not even just for magical purposes, even just for maybe assistance in some endeavor related to an election that you found and you want to call upon a particular spirit for a lucky, auspicious time. And, anyways, without further ado, this method is a little bit complicated, but I'm going to break it down step by step so that you can jump right into it and get down to business. First, let's read from Agrippa's Three Books of Occult Philosophy. This is chapter 26 of finding out of the name of spirits and geniuses from the disposition of celestial bodies. The ancient magicians did teach an art of finding out the name of a spirit to any desired effect, drawing it from the disposition of the heaven, as for example, any celestial harmony being proposed to thee for the making an image or ring, or any other work to be done under a certain constellation. If thou wilt find out the spirit that is the ruler of that work, the figure of the heaven being erected, cast forth letters in their number and order from the degree of the ascendant, according to the succession of signs through each degree by filling the whole circle of the heaven. Then those letters which fall into the places of the stars, the aid whereof thou wouldest use, being according to the number and power of those stars, marked without into number and order, and make the name of a good spirit, which is what we call an intelligence. But if thou shalt do so from the beginning of a degree, falling against the progress of the signs, the resulting spirit shall be evil. What does this mean? Well, throughout this video, we're going to be referencing um, this chart, for example, because this is actually a chart of a Neptune talisman that I'm intending to make in the next couple of days. But what it said is basically, if you want a good spirit, which is known as an intelligence, you are assigning to each degree of the zodiac a Hebrew letter by number. What that means is sequentially, each Hebrew letter is one number through 20. Right, so there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. So basically, what we're doing here is starting from the ascendant of a chart, here 28, So 28 degrees is the degree that the ascendant is on, and that's where it starts always. So that's going to always be your one, is the ascendant, which means to the ascendant, we assign the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is the Aleph. Now, the difference here between deriving a good spirit or an evil spirit, or as they call the delineation between intelligence and spirit, um, we are going to count counterclockwise for our intelligence or good spirit, meaning if 28 is 1, the 29th degree, which comes after 28, is going to be our 2. So to the 29th degree, we're going to assign the second letter, which is the bet. Okay? And onward it would go. So 0 degrees Aries would be the next degree after that, and that would be the third letter. This is the opposite if you want to derive an evil spirit's name for whatever purpose. I would never do such a thing. But we would count it in the opposite direction, meaning um, right now, the 28th degree is the Aleph. It's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. If we wanted to derive the name of a good spirit, we would go back 1 degree to 27 degrees Pisces, which is 1 degree before the ascendant, and that would be the 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet before the first, because it loops back on itself. And that would be the Tav. But if we're trying to derive the name of an evil spirit, um, we would actually make the second letter the degree of 27, because at this point you are enumerating 1 to 22 in a repeating way throughout the entire zodiac in a clockwise way. So that's the thing to understand. Good spirit, counterclockwise, we're counting it. But evil spirit, clockwise. So for our purposes, we're going to be doing this counterclockwise. Let's read on. By this art, some of the Hebrew and Chaldean masters teach that the nature and name of any genius may be found, as for example, the degree of the ascendant of anyone's nativity being known, and the other corners of the heaven being co-equated. Then let that which had the more dignities of planets in those four corners, which the Arabians call Almutes, or Almuten, be first observed amongst the rest, and according to that in the second place, that which shall be next to it in the number of dignities, and by order the rest of them, which obtain any dignity in the foresaid corners. This order being used, thou mayest know the true place and degree of them in the heaven, beginning from the degree of the ascendant through each degree according to the order of signs, to cast 22 of the letters of the Hebrews. Then what letters shall fall into the places of the aforesaid stars, being marked and disposed according to the order found out above in the stars, and rightly joined together according to the rules of the Hebrew tongue, make the name of a genius, to which, according to the custom, some monosyllabical name of divine omnipotency, for example, the El or the Jah, is subjoined. We're going to kill it there. But all that's saying there is that um, we are taking a number of relevant planetary placements by degree. We are taking the Hebrew letters that have been assigned to those degrees, and we are constructing from that a name according to certain rules of ordering of those letters and degrees by prominence and strength, according to essential dignities. But we'll get into that in a moment. And it also mentions that after you derive that name, we apply a suffix, as this is the name of any spirit or angel. And most commonly, that's going to be the L or EL. So let's get practical now. We'll get back to that. So we agree that certainly the sequence begins at the ascendant. So it goes 28 degrees is the first letter, and then 29th degrees is the second letter, then to Aries, which is 0 degrees, um, and then that's your third letter. And then you would keep doing this until you get to the 22nd letter, and then you would start all over from the first letter. So what this looks like is you're going to type it out like this. Whatever degree the ascendant on is where it starts. So that's 28, and I like to put what sign it's in just to separate them. So 28, 1, 29, 2. Now we're on to the next sign. 0, 3, 1, 4. Okay, and onward we would go. And this would be kind of a pain if you're doing the entire zodiac. So normally I don't do it that way. I just count out to whatever planets are relevant. So in this case, it's going to be Neptune and the moon. And I consider Pluto to be a desirable element that I want to highlight. So that's going to be part of the name as well. Um, so I would count out here all the way through Aries, then all the way through Taurus until we get to the 28th degree, which I've already done here. I don't know how well that's showing up on the OBS. Let's see. Yeah, good enough. All right. So yeah, we counted it all out. We go all the way through Aries. And since it's the moon and it's at 28 degrees, our 28 of Taurus is going to be 17. I stopped counting here. There's no reason for me to count on through the rest of the zodiac. So we see that the 17th letter of the Hebrew alphabet corresponds to 28 for counting it out counterclockwise. Now I want to get to Pluto, which is the first degree of Aquarius. So what do I do rather than counting out all the way through this entire zodiac? I start back from where we left off in Pisces at 28 degrees, but now I start counting backwards. Okay, now careful here. Backwards. Don't count forwards clockwise. That will derive a evil letter or name. So I count back 27, which means from the 1 we go to the 22, 26 to the 21, and onward till we get to 0 to the 17. And then we go back one sign to Aquarius. And I stop counting when we get to the first degree, which is where our Pluto is. And that is the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So now we already have a name, or rather, we have three letters, right? We have uh, the Aleph, we have the Peh, and we have the Yod. Now, the next question is how do we order these letters such that we can derive a name? And this is where it can get a little bit complicated, but I'm going to break it down smooth for y'all today. So this is basically the sequence of operations of how we're going to do this. The first item of importance and the highest is primacy. So that means that whatever the planet is related to the talisman you want to make, of course, that has absolute dominance over this entire operation. In this case, it's a Neptune talisman. So that means whatever letter corresponds to that degree of Neptune, that's going to be the first letter, period. Um, Another consideration of primacy is going to be the luminaries. Usually, this is going to be the moon, as the moon is what generally brings the stellar rays to you and to the talisman. So, in other words, this means that in your standard talisman, you may have a bunch of planets you want to include in this name and their degrees, but for all intents and purposes, the primary planet comes first, and then the moon's degree would come second. There is an exception to this, and it is Kazemi talismans. And there are going to be situations with Kazemi talismans where when the planet is within so many minutes of conjunction with the sun, you would actually put the degree of the sun. Um, Usually in a situation, this is only going to really be relevant when um, it's in two different degrees, but they're still within so many minutes of each other. In other words, if it was 28 degrees, 58 minutes of Pisces, and then the sun was 29 degrees, 2 minutes of Pisces, it's still a Kazemi, but it would be two different degrees. So at that point, the sun would have primacy over the moon, which would be the third letter. That's only for Kazemi talismans. It's a niche situation. Normally, it's just going to be the main planet and then the moon. But there has to be a sequence of operations of how we're going to order things after that. And because you may have a number of planets you want to include in this. So after primacy, it's strength. And what we mean by strength is essential dignities. Now, in Agrippa, he mentions all kinds of different methods that were used to derive the almutin. Um, and he cites later in this chapter the different methods used by the Chaldeans and then the Arabians and the Hebrews. We're just going to keep it simple. We're just going to be using essential dignities. Essential dignities means domicile, exaltation, triplicity, term, and face. These are the different ways of placement of the planets that determine their strength, according to traditional sources. I have created a chart for Christopher Warnock's astrology course. If you want to download this, um, you can contact me. I am Armando Cage on Facebook, and I'm a member of the Outer Planet Talismans group. And those are two ways that you can get in contact with me, and I can send you that picture if it doesn't screenshot well through the YouTube video. But for example, the moon is exalted in Taurus. So we know that because the purple symbol of the moon here is colored around Taurus. So the color around the sign indicates its exaltation. And additionally, I have included a sequence here of four black boxes, which indicates domicile planet, exaltation planet, um, detriment planet, and then the planet in fall. Um, and so, pretty much the way you would read this whole thing is you would go to the planet and then you would go to the sign that the planet, or you would go to the sign and then you would find the relation of the planet to that sign, right? So the moon here is in Taurus. This is the sign of Taurus. Um, then in the next whites, we have the face dignity, which is a +1 strength. Then in the black, this tells us our domicile, exaltation, detriment, and fall. Domicile is the strongest. Exaltation is the second strongest. As we can see here, uh, domicile is the ruling planet of the sign. Exaltation, I mean, I'm sure everyone knows this by now, but if not, there's plenty of resources to Google that. But this determines where we're going to find strength. So the moon is exalted here in Taurus. So that's +4 for the moon because that's where the moon is. Additionally, we can see in our chart here that the moon has some green around it. Now, these are the elements. The red's your fire, the yellow's your air, the blue's your water, the green's your earth. The light is the day version of that, and the dark is the night version of that. What this tells us is that the moon rules the earth element by night, and Venus rules the earth element by day. So, what does that mean? That means if the sun is below the ascendant and descendant, that means it's nighttime. And that means it's a night chart. And that means that at these times, um, the moon in an earth sign, either Taurus or Virgo or Capricorn, would have a boost in strength of +3. This is what's called triplicity. If it was the sun was above the ascendant or descendant, it would be a day chart, and then we would apply those rules according to um, the daytime. In other words, Venus would get a boost in an Earth sign, but not the moon. This is a night chart, which means that the moon is dignified by triplicity. So it's dignified by exaltation and it's dignified by triplicity. So it gets +7. So it's moon +7. There's term and there's face. Um, our face is what's called the decan. And these are separated into 10 degrees. So it's 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees. Um, 20 to 30 is where our moon is, and that is Saturn's face, not the moon's. So it's not dignified by face. If it was between 10 to 20 degrees, it would be dignified by face. But our moon is 28 to 30 degrees. There's also terms, as we can see in the outer limits of the model here. And we are at 28 degrees of Taurus, but Mars' term is 28 degrees of Taurus. So, in other words, um, just generally, the moon does not have terms. It does not have terms. It only has phase. So, whatever the planet is, if it's the same planet as the term, that means it gets a +2 boost. In our case, it was only exaltation, which is +4, and triplicity, which is +3. We add that up, it's +7. Okay? Moon +7. Um, in my dignity scheme for the outer planets, I believe Pluto is exalted in Aquarius. I surely do. Um, so that would be +4, according to me. So you could do this with all of the planets to determine their strength. And then that will tell you the sequence of the order of the um, planets. Problem being, and there's other things you can do to score this. You can do accidental dignities, and like how strong certain things are by houses, and you can score them that way. I don't take it that seriously. That may be a way of doing like a tiebreaker um, for if you have two planets that are the same strength by essential dignity. But another way that I like to do a tiebreaker is our order criterion, which means in the actual sequence, clockwise or rather counterclockwise. What if you have two planets that are the same strength? The first planet in that sequence counterclockwise would be the first one in the name, right? So if the Moon and Pluto were the same strength by essential dignity, two ways you can do a tiebreaker is that the Moon comes first, so it's the first letter in the name, and Pluto's the second, so it comes after. Or you can do it by accidental dignity strength there. And if somehow um, it comes out to the same strength by accidental dignity, you could just do it by order. So that's how you would order the name. Okay, so we got our letters, and we now have the order of our letters. So that was 1, which is the 28th degree of Pisces, which is again the Aleph. And it was the 28th degree, which was the Pa, which is the 17th letter. And then it was the 10th, it was the first degree of Aquarius, which is letter 10 of the Hebrew alphabet. So it's Aleph, and then Pe, and then Yod. That is the strength, or the order. So that was 1, 17, or we say Aleph, Pe, Yud, or 1, 17, 10. Now we can do a couple things. We can actually construct our name now. Okay, so it's the Aleph, and it's the Pe, and it's the Yud. Now, as Three Books of Occult Philosophy says, we would add our suffix syllable name of divine omnipotency, which generally is going to be El, just like any other angel name. Now, in this case, the Yod makes an E sound. Okay? So we would not add another Yod. We're just adding an Aleph and a Lamed. If it did not have a Yod at the end, you would have to add a Yod. Okay? So you would have to add the Yod, the Aleph, and the Lamed. In this case, it's already there, so it's just the Aleph and the Lamed. So now we have a text version of our name. Now we can use a Hebrew text-to-speech converter. This is narakit.com to find a pronunciation so that you can actually invoke it by name. Testing. Okay, just making sure that I have audio. Okay,
Apiel.
did that come through?
Apiel.
It did. Apiel. So that's our pronunciation. Now we have a name. But for our purposes, especially in relation to talismanic magic, we also want a sigil. So that is going to bring us here. Well, actually, let's start here. So we know that it's the first, the 17th, and the 10th letter, which is the Aleph, the Pe, and the Yod. And each of these letters has a numerical score associated with it as well. So the Aleph is a numerical score of 1. The Pe has a numerical score of 80, and the Yod has a numerical score of 10. So that's how we would type this out, is 1 plus 80 plus 10, and then we would have to also add the Aleph and the Lamed of the full name, which is 1 and 30, plus 1 plus 30. And now we can take these values and we can insert them into our Camia or magic square. For Neptune, that's 13 by 13 magic square. This can't just be any 13 by 13 magic square. There are certain rules of construction that make it a magic square, and you can find the correct and valid versions of the magic squares for the outer planets at our Facebook group, Outer Planet Talismans. Um, Among other very highly valuable resources, this group has by far the highest value information and resources related to the outer planets, and no one else really comes close. So I highly recommend that you join this group if you're interested in any sort of talismanic outer planet work according to the talismanic tradition. Um, but how we do this is we want to take our numbers from left to right, and we want to open it in a Microsoft Paint. That's the art program I like to use. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to use our brush, and we're going to want to brush out the cells of this square that are the numbers that we want to use. So again, it starts with 1. So we take out our 1. It's 80. So we take out our 80. It's our 10. And it is also our 30. And that's all our numbers here, right? 1, 80, 10, and 30. What we would do now is we would um, make the ends of our sigil. And for this, I like the oval shape. And I want to make sure it's not too big, so it's about 5 size. Now, you got to be careful here anytime that you have two numbers that are the same in your name. So two alephs. Now, this is going to very often be the case if you are making a using an election or a talisman where the item's on the ascendant rather than the midheaven, as it's going to always have the aleph in the beginning of the name and then the aleph as part of the suffix of the angel name, right? So very often you're going to need to leave room for the line of the sigil to pass through the cell of the number 1 while also having the end of the sigil as the circle, you know, decently round. You want to leave room. And the name ends at 30, which is the Lamed. So I like to put this, I like to make it about the same size as the other oval, but I like to put it in the middle. Now what we're going to do, we're going to take our brush, we're going to downsize to a smaller brush. I think 5 is probably good for that. And then we're just going to drop a little dot in the middle of the other squares. Now all we would do is we would put our brush size to maximum. We would put it on white and we would white out everything around the points that we marked. Everything around our circles and everything around our dots. And then it's literally just a game of connect the dots. So without doing all that process, I'm going to show what it looks like to have our line now from our circle to our 80 to our 10. Our 10 now needs to go to our 1. So it's going to pass through here without actually touching it. And then we're going to finalize it at the 30. Okay? And there's our sigil. If we were to white out everything to do this process, it would look like this. Our finished product. Um, Addendum. There is going to be certain situations. There's two things I should mention. This is a 13 by 13. So we have all kinds of big numbers to make these connections. If you're intending to use this method to get extra juice out of a traditional planetary talisman or traditional planetary operation, um, you are going to be using a much smaller square. So, for example, the Mars cameo is 5 by 5. So, if you're using all of these big numbers, for example, there is no 80 in a 5 by 5 cameo. So, instead, what you do is let's look at our list here, right? So, we go into the hundreds, 200s, 300s, 400s. Anytime a numerical score of a Hebrew letter is not present in a cameo, magic square, you take the uh, a 0 off it, right? So if we're looking for a 200 and there's no 200 on this square, we bump it down to 20. And if the 20 is not on the square, and that's a very real possibility with a Jupiter or Saturn cameo. We would bump it down to 2. So anytime the number is not present on the cameo, you bump it down, take off at 0. That's number one. Number two is there's gonna be situations where um, to go back to the same number cell, you have to intersect on yourself. And those are bad sigils. And traditionally, they found workarounds for that. So if we look at, for example, the Mars sigil for the intelligence graphio, um, it starts with 3. So let's reference between these two. It starts with 3, right in the top right corner. Uh, then um, it's going to go, let's start from the backwards to forwards, right? So 30 to, no, okay. So let's go this way. So it's 3 to 200. Now, for whatever reason, they chose not to use the 20. They chose not to bump it down to the 20 here. They chose to bump it down to the 2, maybe because it just looks less cluttered. So we went from 200 to 20, now to 2. So it goes from 3 to 2, right? So 3 down to 2. What comes next? The 1. Okay, up to the 1. Then to the 80. A 5 by 5 does not have an 80, but it does have an 8. So we go to that next diagonal, right to the bottom left of the top right cell. So now we go from the 3 to the 2 to the 1 to the 8. Um, Now, here's the interesting thing. If we wanted to go back to 1 now, this would be a very cluttered sigil. So what they do traditionally is rather than um, going to the 10 and to the 1, they combine the 1 and the 10. So what they do is when you go back, when you have to go back to a number in a way that it would make the sigil cluttered, what they do instead is they add together um, the problematic number, the problematic duplicate number, with the number before it in the name. So it would be the 1 plus the 10. So that would be 11. So what we see here is that the 11 is in the top left. And then it's back to the Lamed, the 5 by 5. So here's the top left. And then it's back to the Lamed, which is 30, but there's no 30 in a Mars cameo, so it's a 3. So that's how we see this shape is formed. So basically, this is just information where if you are making a sigil and you're encountering a situation where running into, if you have two of the same number and going back to that number would create a sigil that is overlapping on itself and just tying itself in a knot. Traditionally, this is the way to approach it, as adding the sum of the duplicate number to the number before it and then going to that cell instead. Um, and now we have a name and we have a sigil. You could print this out, and then there's a number of ways you could approach inscribing this on pretty much anything for a talisman. I like the use of gemstones, and that is where I would recommend that you check out the Outer Planet Talismans group, as we have a pinned post, how to make Outer Planet Talismans, and there are some good resources here that give you information on how to make talismans in all kinds of cool ways. You can do 3D printed stencils. Um, and also, we have all kinds of other stuff here. Once again, we are the pretty much the authority on all sort of talismanic creations of the outer planets. We have the most rich library of information. Um, so we have seals for the planets. We have um, ritual tools. We have information. We there's such a library of information here in this group, so I recommend checking it out. But you can do a 3D printed stencil. You can do I like this little device here. It allows you to do a reflection of your phone. So you can just bring the sigil up on your phone, and then you can inscribe on a gemstone using a diamond tip stylus for a very high level of accuracy. So this is how to um, produce the names and sigils of intelligences and spirits of entire astrological elections. Thank you for watching, and have fun out there.